Holy shit! Up until now on this channel, I've been making a point to only cover currently airing shows, for several reasons. Mostly because I wanted to watch all the shows that come out this season and talk about all of them, and that's a very large number of shows that I was working through, so it was already going to keep me occupied anyway. And also because I figured if I was talking about current shows, we could all be watching them at the same pace. Every time it would be relevant to everyone in the audience. You know, if I talk about episode 8, it's because that just came out and we're all now seeing it for the first time. Whereas if I were to talk about a show that's already ended, half the commenters are already going to have seen the whole thing, and so on and so forth. But I caught up on all the current shows, and I've, dropped most of them, so I'm down to like my core shows that I'm still watching. And I realized with a lot of them that I don't really want to cover them episodically every single week because I usually have the same things to say about them unless something really exciting happens. So this year I intend to watch as much of the anime that comes out throughout 2014 as I can. I want to try and at least try out every single show that comes out this year. So I started making my way back to winter of 2014. And the first show that I checked out is Log Horizon. It started late last year, ran through early this year, and it's going to have a second season starting this fall, so a lot of it will have come out during this year. And I decided to talk about it after 7 episodes just because I'm about 7 episodes into all the current shows, but after 7 episodes, Log Horizon is better than anything I've watched this season, with the exception of Ping Pong and maybe Baby Steps. I was surprised. I went into the show with no expectations. I had no idea if it would be good or mediocre. I knew that one of my friends had watched it, but I didn't really get a sense of whether I would like it. And I started watching it, and it's just really impressive. A lot of people are bound to compare this show to Sword Art Online because they're both shows about a bunch of people who get trapped inside of an MMORPG. But whereas Sword Art Online is a hunking pile of shit that doesn't make any sense, Log Horizon's actually a really good show that takes place inside what actually feels like an MMORPG and actually works like an MMORPG. It has interesting human characters who go through development even early into the show. The characters are already showing a lot of depth and personality and progress as they go along. They have good chemistry together. I'm not going to say that the dialogue is brilliant. I mean, there are some cheesy, repetitive jokes, but not nearly the extent of what you get in, like, No Game, No Life, where whole episodes are a repetitive joke. This has a couple of the cheesy anime jokes that I'm used to seeing in shows like this, but it's not anything that cancels out how well put together the show is. And the reason I'm talking about it after episode 7, the reason I stopped here, is because episode 7 featured one of the biggest payoffs that I've seen in a show recently. I mean, this is like on the level of the kind of emotions I feel during the big payoffs in Game of Thrones is the way I feel watching this episode of Log Horizon. And the reason that's so special to me is because I've been watching like No Game, No Life and Nanana's Buried Treasure and shows like that where I've been complaining continually about how they try to seem smart by withholding information from the viewer. And then when they reveal stuff, it's not meaningful because it just comes out of nowhere. Like in episode 8 of No Game, No Life, where he spends the entire episode exposing all this shit that he had planned and all these, like, brilliant schemes that Sora had come up with. But as viewers, we weren't privy to any of it. It's literally just him coming out at the end and saying, here's all the stuff you should have known, and we go, oh, I guess you were smart. But we don't see it unfolding before us. So Log Horizon, and this will contain spoilers. Hopefully if you haven't seen the show yet, just go watch it. My endorsement should be meaningful, but if you feel like you need a good reason to, this will spoil the thing that happened in episode 7 that was so satisfying. And I don't know that this is a big enough spoiler that I'd ruin it for you, but to me, it had, a lot of impact. So in this show, everyone gets trapped inside of this game. And in the early episodes, one of the first things that the characters notice about the game world is that even though they can summon food just by going through the menus and like selecting food, and it appears before them, and it all looks delicious, it tastes like shit. All the food in the world tastes exactly the same, it just tastes like watery crackers. And this is brought up at first almost just sort of like in passing. It's just like, oh, well, the food sucks, but this is one of the things we've learned about the world now. And so it was just like a little world building element. But I thought it was interesting because I felt like, man, I'd hate to live in that world so much that I felt like they had to do something with that. Like right off the bat, I felt like that's gotta be a thread that comes back because they can't just leave it that way. It ruins the entire anything cool about this world. You would never want to live there when the food tastes that bad. And so they had it come back like once or twice as a recurring joke that they would eat the food and they'd be like, oh my god, it's so miserable, it fucking sucks. So then, in episode, I think, 5, it's revealed that one of the higher level characters, who's a high level cook, has figured out that if you don't go through menus and select the food, if you go and catch food yourself, like go catch a wild deer in the game and cook it, then it'll taste like real food. But only if you have a high enough level chef to prepare it correctly, and only if you have the good enough ingredients. So when this is revealed, it's more of a character moment. It's like everyone gets really excited, they all share in this food, and it's beautifully done. Because you've already felt the pain the characters go through that they don't have any real food and they keep complaining about it. So then, when they get to taste real food finally, they're all like crying and it's beautiful. And I really felt that. Like, I would have cried myself if I had been going like weeks without any taste from food and then got to taste like real meat. I would have probably cried myself. So I really resonated strongly with that scene, and it's presented very well. So that was already a pretty great payoff. But then, it gets even better, because in episode 6, they start setting up that basically when the main characters make it to this town, that they had left the town and came back, because they were on, like, the first arc was like a little adventure where they leave the town to go save this girl, and then they come back. And the town is sort of in a state that they don't like. And so the main character is trying to come up with a scheme, essentially, where he's going to try to unite everyone in this town to try and make their lives better. Basically to overthrow the system that people have let themselves fall into, where everyone's sort of depressed and it's just got a bad atmosphere in the town, and he wants to try and reinvigorate it. And so the first thing he has to do is try and get a lot of people's attention. He needs to raise a lot of money so that he can raise a big enough group of people who will want to change their lifestyle, and then they can all sort of rebel against the big guilds that have a hold over the city and are making it shitty. And so what he does to get everyone's attention is he uses the food. Their guild, who is the only people so far who know that you can cook real tasting food, then set up a stand, and they attract people to this stand and get them to taste the food. And then people realize, like, oh shit, there's more to this game than we thought, there's all this, like, it completely changes everything. And the way this scene is presented in episode 7 is such an epic moment, where you first see someone taste the food, and they're like freaking out, and it spreads like wildfire through the town. You see people everywhere eating it, the guild master's like freaking out, they're like, dude, how is this possible? And there's a moment where a guy takes a bite out of a burger, and he goes, this is gonna change the entire world. And it was like chilling. The whole thing was so fucking perfectly set up. That's how you do a payoff. That's how you do a tactical scene in a show. You don't hold off until the last minute. You know, if this was No Game, No Life, then everyone would have been suffering, and then he would have said, oh, I give you food, and then he would have explained, haha, well, you see, they didn't have good food, but now they do, and therefore they're going to win. Whereas in this show, we felt it. From the beginning, it was set up that the food in this world tastes like shit. We didn't know it was going to be important. We didn't know how it was going to change. And when we see the change initially, when we learn that there's good food in this world, it just seems like something that we're learning to world build. Once again, it's just another world building piece. But then when it comes out and it's tactical, and that's how they start their like rebellion, fucking brilliant. Well played, great writing. I'm not saying Log Horizon has no plot holes. I'm not saying it's perfect. Some of the character interaction is cheesy. The characters are not the deepest characters ever. I'm not saying that they're all totally lovable right from the beginning. But I am saying that this is a really solid show. And it has completely fixed all of the problems that I have with shows like Sword Art Online and No Game, No Life, where, unlike Sword Art Online, the characters feel humble and real, and they appreciate the importance of having a party instead of being the lone wolf soloer. The whole point of Log Horizon is that everyone's going to come together. It's about community. It's about the shared human experience. I would actually compare it to the show Community in that regard. This is a show about empathy and things that matter in the real world. It has themes. Good, solid themes. It is not a show that feels like a 13-year-old wish fulfillment fantasy, even though it is a show that 13-year-olds could appreciate, because it takes place in a video game and has, action scenes. And while the action scenes aren't super gorgeously animated, they're interesting because they're well explained. They use the mechanics of MMOs, where the different party members, you know, they have a tank, they have DPS, they have stuff like that, and they explain to you why it matters and present it in a way that works. This is good writing, and I haven't seen enough of it from anime, so I'm really excited to be watching this show. I've heard it stays good all the way through. I don't know if it can ever match the moment of episode 7 when the woman bites into the cheeseburger, and it was just beautiful. But even if it can't top that moment, even having that puts this show above a lot of what I've been seeing lately. So I'm hype, and I've heard that it ends in a way that leads well into a second season, and there's a second season coming. So even after I finish this show, I have something to be excited about. Definitely check out Log Horizon if you haven't yet.